Hello, and welcome to a wonderful episode of the Pit Pony Podcast. And today we have a great guest who I have been in contact with for quite some time. So I feel as though this has been a long time coming, and I am so excited to hold this space for you today, Clare Gregg, to talk about your journey into teaching, through teaching, and out the other side of teaching, because Clare is not a traditional pit pony by any stretch of the imagination. And actually, if you look at Clare's early years in life, she should have never, statistically, have made it into our profession, which makes it all the more tragic that she is no longer in the profession. Clare came into teaching at the age of 28, but prior to that, as a pupil, was a school refuser. She was on the Child Protection Register. She left school at the age of 16 very abruptly through the tragic death of her best friend to suicide. Her dad had a heart attack. She found herself in the parental role to her younger siblings, and at the age of 18 was homeless and pregnant. So this is somebody sat in front of us today, ladies and gentlemen, who should never have made it to the other side of the desk. But she did. And she tells her story better than I ever could. So sadly, Clare, you are no longer with us in the teaching profession. Welcome, thank you. And what is it you actually do today, Clare Gregg?
So I am now a mortgage advisor. I own my own business, and I'm an activist.
Cannot wait to get into this. Cannot wait to hear your story. And with that said, Clare, nobody tells it better than you do. So starting where you feel most comfortable, let's hear about your journey, Clare.
So yeah, like you said, I came into teaching as a late entrant at 28. I left school when I was 16. I had a brief spell at sixth form college that just didn't pan out, didn't work, and I left to go into full-time employment. And when I was 18, I found I was expecting my oldest child, who's now 26 years old. When I was expecting him, my parents decided that I could no longer live at home, which was how I found myself homeless. I had my son. I had a second son when I just turned 21. And at that point, I was working for Bradford and Bingley Building Society. And my plan was that I would go back to work after I had my youngest child, Joseph. He's now 24. Unfortunately, he was born with a congenital abnormality of the lower limbs that meant that he required significant hospital treatment. He still has treatment today. That's how significant the condition was. And his condition was that he had to have weekly hospital treatment, multiple operations. So I did what any sane person does when they've just had a baby with a congenital lower limb abnormality and has a 2-year-old, and I signed up for a degree. The only qualifications that I had were my GCSEs that I had done pretty well at, even though I wasn't a big fan of being in school. Because I just turned 21, the university that I applied to, my local university, were prepared to consider me as a mature student. And I went for my interview with a 3-week-old baby, and the admissions tutor said to me, he said, "What makes you think that you can do this?" And I was like, well, I'm here because I knew that I needed something to get me through, to focus on whilst going through the treatment with my son. And I also knew that I needed to build a future for my children. And he was like, "Well, will anyone give you an academic reference?" And I was like, "My head teacher at school, he'll give me a reference." And he did. I contacted my secondary school. He gave me a reference. I got onto my degree course and completed my degree. I initially went into teacher training when I graduated when I was 24. But my relationship broke down. It had been abusive. I was fleeing domestic violence, and I started the PGCE and just couldn't continue. I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I just couldn't make it work. And my youngest son was having more treatment. He was going to have another operation, so I just put it on the back burner. I temped, looked after my children, got over this relationship, got settled, got life going again. And it was once life was settled that I decided, and I'd taken a job as a cover supervisor and a teaching assistant. And I just loved it. I was just like, do you know what I mean? This is it for me. I've always loved learning. I've always loved education. Like where knowledge is power. And I fundamentally believe that, still believe that today. And so I'd been working as a teaching assistant and as a cover supervisor, and I just loved it. Like, it was so much fun, and it was something that just came really naturally to me. So it just felt like the right progression just to go back and do my PGCE, which I did. I did that in 2008. I qualified in 2009. And I just had a real passion for it, because education had changed my life. I would not have got to that position if teachers hadn't believed in me, if my head teacher, who even, I owe so much to him, because if he hadn't supported me in writing that reference, then I wouldn't be in this position. And my oldest child is on the autistic spectrum, so I had this insight, and I was just like, this is the right thing for me. And I loved it. There wasn't anything about it that I didn't like.
I mean, what an entrance into the profession when we hear so many stories. I went to university, I did my PGCE, I went in, then later on I had my children and everything changed. You've sat with a 3-year-old at your university interview, so you've definitely come about this in a different way. So what was your subject, by the way, Claire? What was your specialism?
So my specialism was RE.
Okay, so you do RE. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking at this point, you make your way in, you've made it. You should not have a seat at this table. So there's gratitude, there's disbelief. What was it like for you on the other side of the desk? What was your time like as a teacher?
My time as a teacher was varied. So my first role was in a challenge, what could potentially be considered a challenging inner city school, which I absolutely loved. There was a great senior leadership team, people that I'm still in touch with today, an amazing sense of community, an amazing team. It felt very much like the school that I'd gone to myself. And it was really, really supportive. It was progressive. It was forward thinking. They had a very fresh way of looking at how do we deal with the problems and the issues, the social issues that we've got in front of us. They were trialing something called human scale education, where it was schools within schools, and you had communities within a school, so that the students stayed within the community, the staff moved around, and there was a set number of staff that worked within it. So you really got to know the students really well. We only had 10 children in our tutor groups, which were called learning families. It was really holistic. It was a wonderful place to learn my craft.
Lovely.
I learned a lot there.
And I'm going to bring Sarah Dunwood in at the moment, because on a couple of levels, really, because number one, I think knowing the types of schools that Sarah worked in, you recognise Claire as a kid, don't you? You recognise Claire as a pupil in the first instance more than a teacher.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the I do, because those you as a child would have been the child that I really, really focused on in school. Life's dealt you a fairly rubbishy hand, and what can I do to help? And I think that's there's that, but there's also what you've described in terms of the school that you were at in that first job. You're describing one of my schools that I absolutely adored, and it was everything. It was community. The staff were together. The kids were hard, but they were lovely. It was everything. It was everything. So it has just made me go a bit warm and fuzzy, but also I kind of know what's coming.
So how many years do you do at this school, Claire? You're in there, you're loving it. There's the communities, the families. I'm waiting for the but.
So I was there for 3 years, and it's intense, and I've by this point my children are becoming teenagers. I've got a blended family, so I have 2 stepchildren, I have 2 children of my own, and I have 4 boys. There's a year between each one. And my stepchildren, the oldest one, live with us, and they sort of bounce backwards and forwards. So I had a really full-on family life. And my oldest child, number 2, had an EHCP. He was really struggling with the transition into GCSE. And I was like, I was having to, it was quite a distance from where I lived, and actually it was about this isn't a good fit for my family anymore. My family come first. Like, that's it. That's my bottom line. They always have, they always will. There's no job that I will ever do that will be more important than my children. And so I left with no job to go to do supply, because I needed that I just needed that flexibility. Took a supply role in a local comprehensive, very, very different to where I had been, very affluent, very middle class. But because it was a small school, had a quite a big SEN department. People opted for that school because of that. So they named that school on that was statements, now EHCPs. And I started there on short-term supply that developed into long-term supply and ended up as a fixed-term contract. And I loved it. Again, a different kind of teaching, but because of the SEND, which was always been my passion, in inclusive teaching, I just loved it. It was also an opportunity to teach English and geography, which I had as part of my degree, which was great. And that was brilliant. Was really enjoying it. And then I ended up quite seriously ill and needed an emergency surgery. That meant that towards the end of this fixed term contract, I was covering a maternity leave. Obviously I was off work sick for 3 months. It was a significant medical emergency. I'm very lucky to be telling the tale. And this was my first experience of going, hang on a minute, you can't do that. Oh, actually you can.
Okay.
So I'd come to the end, I returned to work, and the person who was coming back from maternity leave wasn't coming back for about another 2.5, 3 months, but my contract was ending at May half term. They were coming back in September. And because I'd been off sick, they didn't extend it. And that was the end of my contract. And I was furious. I'd put my heart and soul into it. And to me, I was just like, this is so unfair, not just to me, but also to the students, who ironically have since become clients of mine. And now I do mortgages for them. And it really, I was like, oh, right, okay. Do I still want to do this? So I was like, right, I'll try some more supply. Got a great, so again, short-term supply that turned into a permanent role. Again, another challenging, comprehensive, great place. Really, really enjoyed it. But then an opportunity arose to go and work in an online school. After I'd been there for about I'd been there for about 6 months. And my oldest son was really struggling. And sort of, you know, when an opportunity presents itself and the planets align, it fits with your family. It just felt like that was the right thing to do. So I took this role in an online school. It was a head of department. It was sort of a middle to senior leader role, and it was an opportunity to build this online school. And it was an alternative provision for students who were unwell, school refusers, mental health issues. My ideal job. Like, I was like, oh, this is a bit of me. But also it was the opportunity to learn something very different, to build new skills, and be involved in something that really felt like it was life-changing for students. And I also felt, because of my experience that I'd had as a child, I was like, if this would have been perfect for me, like this would have been ideal. And I was there for 3 years. Again, loved it, until I decided my children my youngest child by this point had gone to college. Was in the process of going to college, and I was like, do you know what, I really want to get back into the classroom. And so I applied for a role in a pupil referral unit, and that was my final role in teaching.
Okay, so well, varied
Absolutely.
roles. So you end up in this pupil referral unit, this PRU. Tell us about the PRU.
It's not for everyone. But because my thing with teaching was always about the fact that education is supposed to empower, education is supposed to be transformative, it is supposed to change lives. And I was really good at, because of my personal experience, I was really good at working with those kinds of students. And it felt comfortable to me, it felt familiar to me. And I really enjoyed it. And working at the PRU, there was a brilliant team, amazing camaraderie between staff, and it was, and when I first started there, it was really really positive. Unfortunately, I had some issues with my health, which was a recurrence of the previous issue, and had to have some more surgery. And that really knocked my confidence, on one level, because when you're teaching in the pupil referral unit, you have to be able to team teach, which is very physical, which is essentially, worst case scenario, essentially it's restraint. And if you're not physically up to it, which I wasn't, because I'd had abdominal surgery, it really knocked my confidence, made me feel uncomfortable. There'd been some changes. There'd been a change in MAP, there'd been a change in leadership, and it wasn't the place that it was before. We were understaffed, we had too many students, and it was starting to become unsafe. I raised concerns about feeling, this isn't 100%. I'm not, and there was a couple of situations where there were students who I felt required more supervision, who I didn't feel we were equipped to deal with necessarily. And then there was an incident where we were understaffed, and I ended up being assaulted by a student. That wasn't the assault that was the problem, it was the way that it was managed afterwards. And given my experience, my level of resilience, the fact that I can face any challenge head on that is thrown at me, it was very overwhelming to feel that actually this is a bit too much for me. And with hindsight, the reason that it was too much was because I didn't feel safe and I didn't feel supported by not by my it wasn't my colleagues, it was the senior leadership, and the way that this particular incident was dealt with, the way that my concerns weren't addressed, and the way that I was spoken to and made to feel that somehow it was the way that I had dealt with that situation was lacking, when actually it wasn't. We were understaffed, and I ended up basically having a breakdown.
Okay.
You know, there's no two ways of describing it. And I had a period of time off. I returned.
Can I just interject that, because we very often use the term breakdown, and people listening to this, because I know that we're going to talk around the fact you have complex PTSD, you've had a lot go on in your world. What do you mean by a breakdown? Talk to me as if I don't understand this term. What does a breakdown look like for a teacher?
For me, I wasn't able to function, is probably the best way of describing it. My youngest son had gone off to university, and so all of my children by this point are adults, and I think that probably was a contributing factor to it, because I could indulge myself, maybe. I don't know, but I think when your children are young, like, you keep your game face on, and that's not to say that they don't like their father, their stepfather. He is an amazing hands-on parent. Like, he's brilliant. So it's not that I was doing it all on my own. I absolutely was not. But because I didn't have to, I guess because I didn't have to think about the day-to-day parenting, I could just let go. And what that looked like,
you had the luxury of being able to have a breakdown.
Yeah, I had the luxury of being able to have a breakdown, which meant that if I didn't want to get dressed, I didn't have to get dressed. If I didn't want to wash my hair, I didn't have to wash my hair. And it was literally like going into pure on vegetation mode of, like, not wanting to leave the house, not wanting to engage with people, not wanting to have conversations, basically just wanting to completely withdraw from life, hibernate, and put myself back together again. And I mean, I did things like I made myself little lists, which were things like, and I ticked them off, and I was like, this is ridiculous, but I needed something to, like, get me going. And so I'd have, like, little lists that were like, get up, have a shower, put some makeup on, take the dog for a walk, speak to another human being. And it was, and I do joke about it, because I joke about everything, because that is my coping mechanism, because I think there's humor in the darkness. There absolutely is. And there were times there that it was very dark, because I was just like, what am I going to do? And the thought of going back in, I don't know if it was the thought of going back into the classroom. It was the thought of having to deal with that gaslighting again, because teaching and that role had become like an abusive relationship. There were so many things in that experience that mirrored my experience as a child growing up, that mirrored my experience as a survivor of domestic violence, and I just couldn't believe it.
Wow. Sarah, that's quite a powerful parallel to draw.
It's a significant parallel to draw, and I think it goes to something we talked about this with Holly Jones in relation to neurodiversity. We've talked about it in other podcasts. Something happens somewhere along the way in the teaching profession where the psychological and physical safety of the adults was no longer something that was intrinsic to going into work. Something flipped. I don't know when it was, but I know, having conversations, I'm just going to shout them out. I know, having conversations with the drama llamas, that that there was a tipping point where actually, why am I being asked what I did that caused that child's behavior? So sorry, I'm not engaging enough as a teacher, and that makes it acceptable for that child to verbally abuse me, for that child to get in my face, for that child to shove me as they barge out of the classroom. Something happened somewhere, and I don't know why. And for me, if we've got adults going into a workplace, regardless of what the workplace is, but in a school situation where our job is to keep children safe, then somebody surely must have a responsibility to make sure that we are psychologically and physically safe in our own workplace. Something went wrong.
Because here's the irony with what Claire said and what I heard. It wasn't the attack.
Yeah.
It wasn't the act of violence.
How it was dealt with.
It was how it was dealt with. And that, I suspect, is what fed in to the complex PTSD. I am not being believed, or I am at least being questioned, and I'm questioning, what was the response of the
being
school?
blamed.
Yeah, how did they handle it in that respect to make you feel like that?
So there were two incidents. So the first incident, I was spat at in the face, which is really invasive. And it was particularly triggering because of previous experiences.
Okay.
But at no point was so. I washed my face, washed it out of the back of my hair, and because this had happened at lunchtime when I was supervising, and I just carried on. I carried on supervising. I taught all afternoon. Then there was sort of a conversation. There was a conversation at the end of the day. I was very clear about the fact that the student involved had total control over themselves. And the reason I knew that they had total control over themselves is because I had enough time to make a decision about whether or not I was going to move my face or not. And I knew that with this particular student, if I moved my face, that was it. If I moved my face and showed this particular student that he had the power to make me move my face, then it was, all bets were off. So I didn't move my face. And that's how I ended up being spat at in the face. I made this very clear. I made it very clear that this particular student was in control. If he had been as in, we talk about this heightened state of arousal. If he had been up there, not a problem. That's the nature of the work. It's not a problem. All behaviours are communication. It is what it is. That's the way that I think perhaps I see it differently because of my sort of younger experiences. So I always found it really easy not to take anything that the kids did personally. It's just, it is what it is. It is what it is. But when I raised that concern and said he was in control, we need to address this. This isn't the right. We need to talk about this and what we're going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I was told, oh no, that's not possible. He was in a heightened state of arousal. He absolutely was not. And I was expected to teach him on my own afterwards. And he would come nose to nose with me, threatened to stab me in the eye with a pencil. I raised it again, and I had a couple of days off because I was like, this is just too much. And I was working across two different sites. And I was like, I'm fine on the other site. This site, until they do something about this, I'm just not sure I can, I just can't, sort of thing. Anyway, in the 2 days that I was off, this particular student had an episode, assaulted 3 male members of staff, and then they decided that, oh no, this isn't the right place. So it's okay to assault a female member of staff, but the moment that 3 male members of staff can't contain this student, we're gonna do something about it. And I was so exhausted with it. I was just and angry and worn down. And now now I'm able to talk about it. Now like the sort of the ability to challenge is back. I'd lost all ability to challenge. And then I had another it was all too much. I'd had this period of time off after this particular incident. I'd gone back, and then there was a second incident that was the end of teaching for me. So at this point we'd gone through COVID. So I'd gone back at the beginning of COVID. I was out doing home visits, still teaching all through COVID, because we had because the nature of our school, we were open, and so we were sort of doing some classroom teaching, home visits, making work packs, doing all of this. We'd got through that period, and we were back in school sort of on a more full-time basis. But you had all the cleaning stuff, and I was sprayed in the face with cleaning solution by a different student. And obviously it triggered something, because I'd had this breakdown, I'd recovered, I'd gone back to work. And I had a full-blown, I was like, I'm going to have a full-blown panic attack. I've never had one before or since. I had a teaching assistant. I was like, I've got to go. I've just got to get out of this classroom. Left my teaching assistant with the students, walked out downstairs to go into the little staff room that we had to just pull myself together. I'm having a major and a member of senior leadership was in the workbase, had seen me come out, followed me down. I'm having a full on, I'm crying, which is not like me at all, ever. That's not me. And she started talking to me, and I was like, and she's like, this isn't about you. I was like, I'm really sorry. Can you leave me alone, please? And for me to ask somebody to leave me alone is massive, because I'm a real people pleaser. I will go above and beyond. But I was like, can you not see that I'm in no fit state? And then that was it. I never went back.
Wow.
Never went back. I went back.
All that resilience, everything you've gone through, what you went through with your own personal relationship history, with what you went through as a kid, with all of that resilience, when you finally got through to the other side, it's the people who should know better that let you down.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what did it in the end? So I went off sick after that, and I still thought I was going back. And the process of sort of having to have these meetings with this particular senior leader, they were all really traumatic. They were all really, really triggering. I had occupational health input. It was occupational health who suggested that I had complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and that the only way that I was going to recover was to leave teaching. That was going to be the only way that I would recover. And the way that they described it to me was, there's only so much that a person can put up with, and this is the straw that has broken the camel's back.
You've reached your limit.
You've reached your limit. And there was just, it was. I made good use of, once the occupational health had made it clear that it was the environment, it wasn't me. It made it much easier to regroup, make a decision, say, right, that's it, enough is enough. So I took the full period of time off sick that I could take off sick, whilst I made a decision. And then and then I decided that I wasn't going to go back, and that was Easter 2021 I left teaching.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, let's take a minute, shall we, Sarah? Because that is what a way to end that career. That it's horrible. It's absolutely awful. And in my experience, Claire and Sarah, when I'm speaking to members of the Life After Teaching group, and you'd be amazed how many of them are in PRUs and how many of them are suspended. The amount of teachers who get suspended in PRUs, because it is like the Wild West on the one hand. So, it's quite lawless inside some of the PRUs that are run within the UK. But yet the senior leadership team hold the staff to the highest of standards. And there's almost like a disconnect between the reality of what's going on in the classroom and then what's expected of the teachers. So many of them are suspended. Many of them get injured. Many of them are then put on support plans. A PRU and that kind of world of alternative provision. I've had horror stories. I mean, yours in particular is appalling. Sarah, what are your thoughts on what you've just heard? No doubt you've made your notes.
No, I haven't, because I was listening, and it just, I think the thing that injures us most as adults, I'm speaking for myself, possibly Claire, but I know other colleagues that I've worked with, is when the people who let you down are the adults. Kids, you articulated it, Claire, in that moment with that child spitting, he made a calculated decision. It wasn't a decision that was in the heat of the moment. A lot of what happens with children is because their brain chemistry is such that they've not yet learned to regulate. Doesn't make it right. It's part of learning that there's those conversations afterwards. But the adults should be supporting the adults in the best way to support the children. I keep coming back to this. How dare somebody who's seen you walk out of a classroom heightened, distressed, clearly not in any fit state to have a conversation, start, to coin a kid's phrase, pecking your head. Let me go.
Telling you how you should be dealing with it emotionally.
It's nonsense. So I come back to psychological safety. I come back to teachers are quite often victims of very inappropriate behaviour. Let's be tempered, but very inappropriate behaviour. That young person spat at a police officer on the street, they'd be arrested. It would be a public order offence. We're not doing these.
After a bus driver,
correct?
A stranger in the street.
I mean, aside from the disgustingness of it, it needed dealing with. But I want to go to something else about injury, because you talked then, Sharon, about staff being injured in PRUs, and I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, that what you're talking about is physically injured. There isn't an extensive conversation going on about the number of adults who are being mentally injured in their workplaces. And ACAS, Health and Safety Executive, class mental injury, work-related stress, this sort of stuff, it's an industrial injury. And it just gets swept aside because it's not visible. And I'm going back to something you said, Claire. And when it's a woman, it's histrionics and drama. But when three burly men can't deal with it, then something else gets done. Makes me furious.
So, the tough nut leaves teaching. She goes. Kids have flown the nest.
Yes.
You are post-COVID. You are out of teaching. What happens then? You find yourself, you've lost that identity. You know you're not going back. What are your next steps? Because I think it's quite important, because the term mortgage advice, advisor certainly wets the whistle of quite a few of our pit ponies because it is something they fancy doing. I know we had Rob Newlands on. He's a mortgage advisor. It is something that teachers can segue nicely into. Tell us what you did, going back to your Bradford and Bingley days.
So when I worked in Bradford and Bingley, this was before mortgage regulation, and I was essentially a cashier, used to open accounts and things like that. And all of my jobs before I was a teacher had always sort of been customer service based. So my first job was working on the ferries between New Haven and Dieppe when I was 16, 17, which I loved, but wasn't going to be going back to do something like that. So I've always been very practical and pragmatic. So I've always been like, right, what have I got to do now? How do I solve this problem? What are the next steps? And so I wrote a list of all the jobs that I'd done before that I'd enjoyed. I worked out roughly what I needed to earn, which I'm really lucky. I'm in a privileged position that because my children were grown up, there wasn't the cost of the children. My husband is in a role that means that he can take the brunt of the household costs. So there wasn't the same pressure to earn what I was earning when I was teaching. So I made a list of everything that I enjoyed, made a list of all the skills that I have. What are the transferable skills? What are the things that I'd seen and thought, oh yeah, I could have a go at that? And what qualifications would be needed? How much would it cost? How long would it take? And literally, I was like, well, I worked in the bank. I enjoyed that. Google was my friend. And I was like, yeah, I'll be able to do that. That's literally all teaching skills. It's, educating, assessing, research. That'll be fine, not a problem. So I did the CMAP qualification, which I think I did it in about 6 weeks. I just crammed for it, did the exams, and then I looked for a trainee role. I knew that if I was going to learn it, I didn't want to be in a bank because you're only dealing with one lender. I wanted to be an estate agency because that's where houses are bought and sold. And I figured if you're going to be a mortgage advisor, you need to know how estate agency works. So I applied for a trainee role at the largest estate agency group in the country. Got the role. And handed in my notice. And that was, that was that. And so, I started how old was I? 40, 41. Started in a trainee role.
Yeah. It's got a bit of kudos, that, hasn't it? I'm a trainee. I'm a trainee. Yeah. I'm only a young thing.
It's like the reverse. It's the reverse of mature student, isn't it? When you're in your early 20s, mature student's a great thing.
Yeah.
Trainee.
Yeah. Honestly, I was just excited to be able to go to the toilet when I wanted and have a cup of tea. I was delighted.
I think your story's a great one. So what does your day-to-day look like now? What does your working day look like as a mortgage advisor?
Oh, it's so because I run my own business, sort of half of my work is sort of working on the business and the other half of the work is mortgage advising. So for me, it's really important that the work that I do has some kind of social impact. So I specifically work with a very small niche. So my thing is about supporting regular working people, working class people out of the private rental trap and into home ownership. I'm furiously passionate about it. And I've started to get involved in some activism alongside that. So it's not just sort of traditional mortgage advising. There's a real education bit involved in that as well. And I'm working on building a platform so that I can provide resources and like a plan for here's your blueprint for if you're renting at the moment, this is what you can do to become a homeowner, because there's so much out there that people don't know about and my industry doesn't shout about because it's not profitable enough for them. So my day-to-day work is meeting with clients, problem solving, researching mortgages, decisions in principle, mortgage applications, a lot of hand-holding, of guiding people through the process, I feel like my tribe find me. So I have a lot of neurodivergent clients who my approach seems to appeal to. I don't know. I can't imagine why. But yeah, I do a lot of hand holding through the process. The name of my business speaks for itself. I'm that mortgage woman. So you either love me or hate me. So when I bring up solicitors to hassle them about why things aren't progressing, I'm that mortgage woman. But yeah, so it's a real mix of everything. And because I'm self-employed, I can work everywhere, anywhere that I want to. So last week I was in Portugal.
Yes, you were, because we were supposed to be recording this last week. And whilst we was, and you're stuck in the airport. And, you know, I just think it's great because you've not lost who you are at the very heart of who you are because of your activism. You're still championing the underdog. You're championing the working class person. You are championing the person who should never own their own home, just like you were the girl who should never have been in that classroom. So,
yeah,
thank you for spending some time with us this evening. It's been glorious. And I'm going to ask you to reflect now, Claire, since you've left the classroom, and I'm going to ask you to think about your sliding doors moment. What has happened since you left teaching that you know for a fact would never have happened had you have stayed in that classroom?
So there are lots of things that have happened, but the big one, the main one, is that my partner of, well, it's 20 years this month that we've been together. But he went from being my partner of 17 years to becoming my husband. I got married.
Oh, that's lovely.
Which I don't think would have happened. Leaving teaching was very difficult. The first year was a real process of grief. You're grieving for your identity, you're grieving for your hopes for the future, all of the things that you thought were going to be and going to happen. They're not, and being a teacher, like, it's a massive part of your identity. I still tell people that I used to be a teacher because I'm really, really proud of the fact that I was a teacher. And you know what? If someone waved a wand and changed it and it got better, I'd go back in the morning.
Who knows? You know?
But yeah, getting married, and my husband, he said it's like the light has been switched back on and you are who I met. He said it's like teaching sucked the essence of you out of you, because I had to be quieter, smaller. I couldn't be as vocal. And now, you know, and I got back to being that, which is why my sliding doors moment is getting married. But I think the main thing is that I am myself again now. So, and that's why I've been able to get into the activism again, because I don't have to be small. I don't have to be quiet. I can stand up and say, actually, no, this is wrong. This is, you know, which is, you know, is proving interesting in my work within my industry, especially as I refuse to do buy-to-let lending. So, but I can stand by my principles, and that's important.
You are talking to two women who never know when to keep their mouth shut and end up in trouble most, if not all of the time, in their own Facebook group, in the world of the teaching profession. And long may we have those voices, Claire. Long may we have them. And can I just thank you on behalf of Sarah, our listeners, and myself, really, for spending that time. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.